Well, let's start at the beginning.
Yeah.
Tell me, what is PATHS? What does it do?
Well, PATHS, which stands for Post-Abortion Trauma Healing Service, provides counselling and support and information really around abortion, loss and trauma, and healing journey, healing processes.
So why is it actually needed?
I think mainly because abortion, loss and trauma isn't well recognised and definitely not acknowledged either in society at large or even in professional health circles. It's an under-recognised issue. It's not viewed as a pregnancy baby loss, which it is, and other pregnancy baby losses do get that acknowledgement now, but abortion still doesn't.
Why is that?
Our sense has been, as we set up the organisation, that there's quite a lot of stigma and taboo around abortion still. It's still viewed as this polarised issue, and people get caught up in the politics and the moral debates and everything else around abortion, so it's kind of shrouded in that. One of the other issues, I think, is that abortion in New Zealand is provided as a core health service, and so it's viewed as a simple, safe surgical procedure to deal with unplanned or unwanted pregnancy. So it's commonly accepted as a means to deal with those pregnancies, but the actual implications and the impacts are not really acknowledged for people. And so there's no place or nowhere for people to talk about their experiences, which is hard.
So how does it actually help?
Well, when they finally find us, because again, it's really hard for people to come and step out and say, I need help, because of those issues of guilt and shame and secrecy and stuff quite often. So when we first set up, we thought we were going to be inundated and flooded with lots of people wanting help, and that hasn't been the case because of what I spoke about before. But when people do come, what we do provide is one-on-one counselling support, and we journey with them through a 10-step healing recovery program for abortion, loss and trauma, which we've developed and based on the 10-step program that Victims of Choice developed in the United States. Elizabeth Virtue developed a psycho-spiritual program to journey through the issues around abortion, loss and trauma, because in each healing journey there are key issues and aspects that need to be addressed, and they're common throughout all the programs that I've seen and all the processes that I've seen, whether it's a retreat weekend or whether it's a one-on-one counselling program or whether it's a group program. It's like there's core issues that need addressing, and generally ordinary grief counselling touches on it, but it doesn't necessarily unpack a lot of the finer complexities for people who have had abortions, because it's much more complex than just a baby loss, pregnancy baby loss.
So are you just talking to women, or is it the wider family?
It's often much wider, and the further out you go, the more under-recognised it is. So for fathers, very much almost like denied kind of their rightful grief and loss and experience. Grandparents, siblings, aunts, family, friends, yeah, so it does have the ripple effect. But again, these people aren't offered opportunities to really speak about what it meant, what it means now for them. I think most people who are making these pregnancy decisions have the expectation that once they've had the abortion or termination, that they can go back to how things were beforehand. The reality is quite different, because a woman who's had an abortion or termination is always a woman who's been pregnant, and she's gone through that experience. And it isn't like a tonsillectomy or an appendicectomy. It's not just a surgical procedure, it is a deeply human and relational experience. And being a death experience, a life-death experience too, it affects people on all levels of their being: physical, psychological, spiritual, social, relational aspects of their lives. And so people are not prepared for what might happen afterwards. Part of that is possibly lack of information in some situations. Part of that is also that people are in crisis at the time of making the decision. So they're faced with this problem and they're desperately trying to find a way out of the situation and restore stability and get back to normal. And so the pressures are immense in a very constrained time frame often for them. And so to be able to think through all the ramifications, there's often not the capacity or the time to actually be able to do that, or the support necessarily either. Yeah.
So does more research need to be done into what happens after an abortion?
Research is an interesting area, and we've dabbled a wee bit in sort of looking around at the research available, and what has tended to happen in terms of the research that is out there is it either comes from the pro-life sector or it comes from the pro-abortion sector, and quite often is coloured because of those biases and the limitations around the research for post-abortion complications and impacts. There's a bit of research happening in New Zealand. Dr. David Ferguson did a good piece, a longitudinal study, and found that there was a correlation between mental health problems and, for young people who had had abortions, and he recommended more research. There's a study going on in Otago University and Auckland University, which is looking at the ethics around decision making around termination and abortion, which sounds really interesting. There are individuals who are doing projects in university who have become interested in this issue for the same reason. It's an under-addressed issue. We've had students who have been doing things around acknowledging that post-abortion needs specific, specialised counselling really, and just acknowledging that it does need help. And one guy who did some research, his degree assignment was he did interviews of men and their experiences, so very much getting to the heart of things about people's realities, I think, is the way that we need to go. Numbers only give you a certain picture. Being able to get into the real lived experiences of people gives you another whole total picture of what really goes on. But in talking about that too, in terms of the loss and trauma of abortion, I think it's often thought that everyone who has an abortion is traumatised, and it's really, really bad, and you know, it's going to damage them for life. That's actually not necessarily the case. There's a whole spectrum of loss and trauma and grief around abortion. Some people adjust and cope really well and will go on with life as if nothing's happened, and others will be severely traumatised. So there's a whole spectrum of reactions to abortion. My sense is it's the kind of life event, not unlike unemployment, divorce, other bereavements, that affect people somewhere, and they have to come to terms with that and find a way to move forward from that. So my sense is it affects people whether they realise it or not, and maybe in ways that they don't realise. And that's played out when people come for counselling and are surprised often what they discover when they actually do the healing journey. My belief is that in time, abortion, loss and trauma is going to become a major health issue. A bit like sexual abuse was hidden for so long. My hope is that if we can raise the awareness around the reality of people's experiences and validate those and affirm people in that, it will hopefully make it easier for people to come for help, and then those people can actually support other people, and maybe even to give some sort of witness that it's not necessarily the simple solution that they were hoping for.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed.
Awesome.